and supporting you along your journey. I had a few thoughts that I wanted to share, and I will that it reaches those that it will inspire, encourage, ignite, and activate. So last night I was at a poetry event. Um, I performed. I performed my soulmate poem, and I had a very great response from the crowd, for which I'm grateful. There was another poet that performed the poem, and her poem also got a great response from the crowd. And it was the nature of her poem that I was inspired to speak to you all about. So, in her poem, well, I'll say that the idea of her poem is she spoke of being a single mother and a single Black mother, and all of what comes along with that. That she did not complain about, she did not whine about, she did not make excuses for. She definitely took accountability for her decisions to be in the situation that she was in. However, she highlighted that in being in the situation that their father, loves them and they love their daddy. However, when it came to the hands-on, tangible, making things happen perspective that comes with being a parent or being a mom, he did not reciprocate or participate in that same frequency, which leaves quite a bit of weight on the shoulders of the mothers to make some shit shake. And it resonated with me because, I've been speaking with you all for over a year. And several of the topics have been geared towards aiding and supporting you all in making decisions that are significant, right? Significant and impactful outside of just yourself. And I do recall touching on the idea of the parenting, the fatherhood, and your value and your importance. However, I would like for us to, I would like this episode to provoke thought within you, right? About why is it that the same urgency that mothers have in securing and taking care of their offspring that you as a father do not have. Now, if you are a father that is hands-on, you on deck, you can be called on, you get your children regularly, you involved in their lives, then this episode is not for you. However, excuse me, I'll say this episode is not directed towards you. However, you may still find something beneficial for yourself. That will continue to aid you and continuing on the track, or encourage you or inspire you to continue to do what you're doing, right? However, I was thinking about, there are some men who have children who find themselves in situations where they're not stable, right? They don't have their own address. They don't have a lease, excuse me, a lease or a deed with their name on it. They don't have a secure place that they call home to where they can have their children with them and their children can call it home as well. There is a lack of stability in not only your home life, however, your financial world as well, right? Like the consistent income to secure and take care of the responsibilities that come along with being a parent, because children are always needing something. Now, everybody's going to raise their children different, right? So I'm not saying, I'll say this. I am saying that it is important to be in a position to feed, clothe, and house your children, right? That is the bare minimum as a parent that we should be giving them, right? And then and that's on a physical sense. And in a spiritual sense, we should be able to love them, nurture them, protect them, um, nurture them, love them, right? Teach them, elevate them, expand their thought process, right? And plant seeds that they can utilize at a later time in their growth and development. And the ultimate goal, I believe, is that we want to create children that are better than us, right? Because we already experience a certain level of parenthood through our parents parenting us. And all of us have had experiences where we were like, when I have children, I'm not never gonna do that. Or, when I have children, I'm gonna allow my children to do thus and so and thus and so. And that came as a result of the parenting style that our parent had didn't resonate with us as being the kind of parents that we're gonna be. So, ultimately, we are responsible for providing for our children in the spiritual, the mental, the physical, and the emotional. And it is more often than not, that, men are not secure within them own selves to be able to food, clothe, and house their own selves. So that then trickles down to the children, right? And one of the things that I think society has wanted Black men to believe is that your presence, your knowledge, your love, your wisdom, your insight is not valuable, is not needed, right? I definitely acknowledge that there has been a continual process of like wearing y'all down, like beating y'all down to the point where you can see the evidence of it in the way that you care for your offspring, right? I was before I hit the record button, I was in thought exploring this before I came to the conclusion that I would go ahead and record it, that the children that we see are the seeds of the men, right? Yes, we as the women, we house them, we protect them, and we love and nurture them through our womb for 9 months, right? However, had it not been for the man implanting his seed in our womb, there would be no child, right? So the child comes from the man, right? The child comes from the man, and we house and multiply, right? We take the seed and we multiply it, we nurture it, we fertilize it and nurture it with our egg, and or actually our egg is the house, right? So we're nurturing it with our, with the food that we partake. However, the egg houses the sperm, and in that housing, it is multiplied, it is protected, and what we bring to the table, our half, of the chromosomes, and now a child has been created. And most men do not interact in this reality as if they know and understand the levity that carries, right? In a traditional, in the way that the system has traditionally been set up, when the child is born, you have a birth certificate that you have to fill out, and you put the mother's name, and you put the father's name, and you put the child's name. In the ideal situations, the parents are married. So automatically the child receives the father's last name because the mother has already accepted the father's last name. So most naturally, the child is going to have the father's last name. And this is the beginning of legacy, right? However, in more recent times, it is not like that, right? It is where the mother has her last name, and oftentimes, and the father has his last name, of course. However, oftentimes the father isn't even on the birth certificate. And the way that they have the system set up, you're unable to give that child a last name that's not yours as a mother, without having somebody's name in that father section that has that same last name. That's how they got the system set up, right? However, we know the power of legacy, like of carrying on names. That is the perpetuation of your legacy for people to remember. And although we can go back and we can get real deep that these are not even our names, these are names that we carry from, slave owners, because these are not our original names. We can't get that deep. However, this episode is not for that. However, for those that think like that, I want you to know I understand and I'm right there with you, right? However, in this context, the man's name, like his legacy is carried on through his name. And when you're out here creating these offsprings with women that you haven't married, right? Or with women that when it comes time for birth, you aren't present to put your name on the birth certificate. You aren't an active and integral part of this child's entrance into the world, then this child is now carrying on the legacy of his or her mother, which is, that's fine, right? That's fine. However, we're speaking to you, right? We're speaking to you about your legacy. So you've had children, right? Let's say you've had 3 children. You've had 2 sons and a daughter, right? And you hadn't married their mother. So these 3 children have their mother's last name. So as they grow and develop, they are magnifying, amplifying the legacy of their mother's lineage, which is fine, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. However, I am looking to provoke thought, because what does that say about your legacy? Excuse me, what does that say about your legacy? Who is going to carry on your legacy? Now, we can go even deeper and say, well, my brothers have children and my sister has children, and so the family name will be carried on, and that's cool. That's beautiful. I'm happy to hear that. However, what about the bloodline from you? The genealogy through you. So now, we're in a situation where not only is the physical presence of the Black man minimized, and he doesn't see the value in it in and of itself, the legacy that he leaves behind is now minimized. And he don't see nothing wrong with that either. So it is my will that, we get to a point where we recognize, even if it's not for a collective, on an individual basis, we're able to recognize the power, ability, strength, necessity of you showing up and being who you are. And I know this is not something that, most people experience as being easy, right? It's so much that hasn't been taught. And when it was taught, it was in a manner where most wasn't able to really grasp it because of the reality that they were in. It's kind of hard to receive some spiritual, some positive elevation when that's not the rhythm that you're used to while being in the trenches. You know what I mean? Like, when you're in the thick of things, when you're in the dark, it's hard for you to, even fathom that there's light. So if somebody coming and telling you that, no, there's light, it's not just darkness, there's light too, and all you've experienced is darkness, it's kind of hard to believe or accept or even explore that being a reality when you're in the thick of the darkness and you're trying to navigate. So I'm not saying it like in any, beating down or coming down on you all. It is a reality, right? There are women out here that are raising these children by themselves that they didn't make by themselves. And yes, again, women have to take accountability for their body and their choices and all of that. That is so true. And the pretty dope thing about it is that there are women out here that's doing that. The women are taking accountability, right? They're taking accountability for their decisions. They're taking accountability for the life that they chose. However, every single day they still show up. They still show up, they still get up, they still go make shit shake, they make things happen. They got 2, 3, 4 jobs, to make sure that the children have what they need. They're up early, making sure that the children get out and get off to school, and they're out late, and sometimes they're not coming home until after the children are damn near getting ready for bed because they out there making it happen. However, the taking accountability and responsibility, the men are not doing the same. That the men at so many levels are taking hall passes, to do what they want to do, to live their life, to be out in the street or on the corner or pursuing their dreams, or, just barely making it, right? And there's no urgency, there's no urgency in them to do what's necessary to secure beings, humans that didn't ask to be here, right? And that's the part that really resonates with me, which is why I even, got up out my bed to record this episode, because we lack urgency, and that urgency key is the detriment of us. The lack of urgency is the marker between life and death. You have these children who are defenseless on all levels, spiritually, mentally, and physically. From the age of 0 to 7 or 8, I believe, children are sponges. They are absorbing everything. And when we think about that, oftentimes we think on the physical conscious sense. However, to take it layers deeper, subconsciously, the children are absorbing everything at that age. It's so many foundational thought processes that are being created during 0 to 7 that are subconscious, that later on affect us in adulthood far, far down the line. And then we're not really understanding why we have these certain behaviors, why we have these certain sensitivities, why we have these certain biases, why we have these certain trauma formed responses. And it's because of the things that we experience from 0 to 7, and of course after 7 too. How I'm saying, these are the foundational years. And I can go so deep with this because the men are not present, right? Like, so these children from 0 to 7 are only experiencing the feminine energy, and then oftentimes they're experiencing the feminine energy that's out of balance, because she has to operate in her masculinity to even be able to get these things done. Like, she has to step outside of her nature in an imbalanced way, because we all have divine masculine and feminine within us. That's the representation of the yin and the yang, right? However, we have more of one than the other. So we have more feminine than we have masculine, and you all have more masculine than you have feminine. However, we both have both. And because of the condition, the woman has to come out of her femininity and operate mainly in her masculinity. So that as a result, the children are experiencing a mother that's present and giving her all and doing her best. However, they're experiencing her being out of balance. So they never even really get to experience the essence of who their mother is, because she's in survival mode. However, that even is able to take place because she's operating from a place of urgency, right? She is willing to throw her own self out of balance, sacrifice her own self for the sake of her children. However, when we look on the other side of the equation, in a general sense, as a collective, men are not doing the same. Men are not going into survival mode to secure the livelihood of their children, to secure that they have a safe and stable environment, to where they are protected on all levels, where they are nurtured on all levels, loved on all levels, heard and seen on all levels, taught and embraced on all levels from the masculine expression. And it's disheartening that this is the reality that we're in. However, I find solace and peace in knowing that this is all part of the divine plan, and it is the time of change. Things are changing, right? And the more that we continue to elevate, evolve in this reality, in the acceptance of the divine plan, then it's going to be more seen in the physical as we continue to grow and evolve as a people. And it is my will that you find yourself, you find your place in this. You find yourself and you secure your place in this future, because you are so needed on so many levels. I do my best to reiterate your value, your importance, in this world, period. However, on a micro perspective, you're needed within your family. You're needed within the lives of your children. You are needed to wake up, to show up, to give all of what you got, and then dig deeper for more because of your children, because of your woman. Like, it is a beautiful reality when you see a Black man that is living in his truth and operating in his power and magnifying and amplifying the love and light that he is to others, period. However, even more so to his immediate circle, which generally is your woman and your offspring. And we are robbed of seeing that beauty because of the lack of urgency, the lack of accountability for yourself. Men are tired of women saying men ain't shit and this, that, and the third. And I can imagine I'd be tired too, right? Like, let's keep it 100. I'd be tired too of being told the same thing over and over again. However, and then it not even being a positive light, right? Like, it's easy to take offense to something that's being shared. It's more challenging for you to look at yourself and take accountability for the truth in what's being expressed. We got to come out of a space of dealing with our feelings and really deal with the truth of the matter and look at it from an objective point of view and accept what it is that we see, and then make a strong declaration that we're going to change it, set the intention in motion, and work the plan. Take the steps to bring about a change. And I know it can feel like a lot of pressure because everything is stacked up against you, right? It's easy to talk about the system and how things was designed. It's easy to speak about, the things that happened long before you got here that allowed or caused you to be in a situation. It's easy to fall back on, well, my father wasn't there for me. It's easy to fall back on all of these things. However, those things were put in place to cause you to be able to see your strength, for you to be able to make a conscious decision that regardless of these odds that stacked against you, you're going to choose you. You're going to bet on you because you know within you the power that you feel concerning yourself. You feel it. You feel it in your body. You feel it in your being. You feel that you're powerful. And you express it in many different ways. I'm sure if you sit back and you observe as, you step back and you observe as an observer of you, of your life, you'll be able to see where you show up and you express your power. You'll be able to recognize and remember different experiences that you was in where you show forth your power, where you was operating in the divinity of who you are. However, you're doing it at a selective time. You're not doing it all the time. You're not living in your truth all the time. Part of living in your truth is having to take accountability. Because without taking accountability, without surveying the scene and really seeing the areas where you got to improve and the things that you should do better and where you falling short and, the things that you're giving yourself excuses for, there won't be no growth. So we got to get real with ourselves and really look within and really, like, the way you be schooling your friend or, being there and being supportive for your friend and, pulling a coattail, you got to pull your own coattail. Can't rely on people around you to highlight the areas in your life where you need to step up, where you need to improve. It's great when we do have those kind of people around us to help keep us sharp. May Allah continue to bless us with those energies being around us. However, at the end of the day, this is your marathon. This is your journey. There's no coach, in the marathon of life. If you're blessed and fortunate to come across a coach, absolutely, that's a blessing. But it's not mandatory. You got to be the coach of your own, your own team. You know what I mean? This is your legacy. So I challenge you, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? You know, when you're no longer here in the physical realm, what do you want people to remember about you? What do you want people to think about you? Like, have you even considered, decades from now? Like, do you want people to remember you, a century from now? What are you doing to leave an impact and an impression so that your name carries on? Are you even concerned about making an impact on this world? Are you even concerned about leaving a lasting impression of a high frequency, a high vibration that your children will be proud of, that your grandchildren will be proud of, that your great grandchildren, your great 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 grandchildren will be proud of, that your wife will be proud of, that your mother and father will be proud of, even though they weren't able to make that same kind of impression? They'd be proud that you were able to. You beat the odds. That's really what this is. It's like, this is why I'm so adamant about the children being better than us, because each generation got to get better. We have to get to a point where we are back to who we are. In my belief, in my understanding, that's what we're here to do. We're here to remember, to come back into the awareness of who we are from our essence. And from our essence, we are fractions of the Most High. We are divine celestial beings that agreed to come here in this physical human reality to learn the lessons that Earth had to offer. Because somewhere these lessons, this knowledge is needed somewhere out in the galaxy, in the universe, in the star system, in creation. It's needed. And we agreed to come here to learn these things, to evolve our spirits, our entities, our souls, right? And then help others in the process, to help awaken and elevate other consciousness so that the frequency of the planet could be raised. The planet is a live living thing, right? It's a live living entity. And she's hurting. The way that things are taking place on the earth, she's hurting. So us choosing to pursue our legacy, to be high vibrational beings, to show love, to show grace and compassion, to grow and evolve to be the highest expression of the Most High within us as possible, helps her heal. It helps raise the vibration of the planet, right? So it's more than just you. It's not just about you. This thing goes deep, and you get to participate hands-on by the way that you develop your children. This is why we're taught that children are the future. This is why we taught you spare the rod, you spoil the child, right? It's so many, even the, truth will come out of the mouths of babes. It's so much to inspire us to do our best concerning the development of the children, because they will perpetuate what we place in them. So we place love, compassion, understanding, grace, nurturing, strength, power, the knowledge of self, a divine purpose, that will be magnified and perpetuated as well. So willfully, I'm going to wrap this up. So willfully, what has been expressed touches your nature. Something is inspired in you. It is thought-provoking. It will encourage you to have some real conversations with your bros, with your fellas, with the kings, so that you all can and create some solutions to bring about a change. First, have the conversation to see that the change is even needed, and hold each other accountable, and then come up with systems to create the change that we all love to see and need to see. So with that being said, it is with great pleasure, great honor of mine that I am able to be presented to you, to share these ideas, and from a place of love and inspiration, so that we get to see who you are. We get to experience the power that you are, and you get to see who you are and the power that you possess. So with that being said, I love you, Black man, and I will you are navigating this journey the best that you know how, and when opportunities are presented, you receive the assistance and the support so that you can elevate higher. And I look forward to you standing in your power. And know that even on your weakest days, there is someone who believes in you. Whether you see me or not, I am here, and I'm always sending healing energy and encouragement and love and nurturing energy to your spirit. Until the next time, Black man, love and peace.